In the blistering heat of a forward operating base deep inside Helmand province, Afghanistan, with Taliban mortars walking their way closer every hour, a lone female Navy cryptologic technician sat cross-legged on an ammo crate, screwdriver in her teeth, soldering iron glowing like a firefly, trying to fix the only long-range SATCOM radio that still linked the isolated Marine company to the outside world. While every man in the command tent was either shouting, praying, or staring at the map with thousand-yard eyes, she never looked up until a 4-star SEAL admiral walked in, snapped a perfect salute straight at her, and the entire room full of battle-hardened warriors froze like someone hit pause on the war itself. If you love your mom and dad, the people who taught you never to quit, smash that subscribe button right now and show this stubborn American woman some love, because this story is about to hit you harder than incoming 107mm rockets. Her name was Petty Officer 2nd Class Riley Cable Girl O'Connor, 26 years old, 5'4" in boots, red hair twisted up under her cover, freckles across her nose that made half the Marines treat her like a little sister and the other half terrified to speak to her at all. The nickname started as a joke. Every time something with a wire broke, someone yelled, "Get Cable Girl!" But by the 3rd month of deployment, it was spoken with the same reverence as Doc or Top. She could rebuild a PRC-117 in a sandstorm, splice fiber under fire, and once kept a drone feed alive by holding 2 bare wires together with her teeth while the bird circled overhead looking for the enemy spotter trying to kill them all. That morning the base had taken a beating. A lucky rocket shredded the main comms tent and turned the primary HF rig into modern art. The backup SATCOM developed what the comm chief called the death rattle. Intermittent signal, dropping every 30 seconds, just long enough to lose the artillery fire mission or the medevac request. The Marines were down to 2 magazines per man, the QRF was still 40 minutes out, and the Taliban fighters were massing for a ground assault everybody could see on the thermal drone feed. The company commander, a lieutenant colonel who hadn't slept in 3 days, kept glancing at the dead radios like a man watching his own heartbeat flatline. Riley walked in with a Pelican case, a roll of 550 cord, and 0 fanfare and said, "Y'all mind if I take a look?" The colonel waved her in like she was the last helicopter out of Saigon. She opened the radio, found the fried power amp module, realized they didn't have a spare, and without missing a beat started cannibalizing parts from every other broken handset, an old blue force tracker, and somebody's personal gaming console that had been blown up 2 weeks earlier. She worked fast, humming old-school Metallica under her breath, grease up to her elbows, completely ignoring the mortar rounds airbursting 200 meters away. That was when the tent flap ripped open and Rear Admiral Nate Callahan, commander of all naval special warfare in theater, stepped inside with his security detail. For stars on his collar, trident gleaming, face like carved oak. Everyone in the tent, colonels, sergeants major, captains, snapped to attention so hard you could hear knees pop. Except Riley. She was flat on her back under the console, legs sticking out, still soldering. The admiral's eyes locked on her name tape. Connor. A flicker crossed his face that nobody understood yet. "Petty Officer O'Connor," he said, voice calm but carrying like a .50 cal. She slid out, stood up covered in carbon and hydraulic fluid, and rendered a salute that would have made a drill instructor cry from pride. Admiral Callahan returned it sharper than anyone had ever seen him salute a junior enlisted in 28 years of service. Then he held it, and held it. The entire tent stayed frozen, confused, waiting for the punchline. Finally he dropped his hand and said, loud enough for every soul to hear, 15 years ago in a trailer park outside Jacksonville, Florida, a scared 11-year-old girl watched her daddy bleed out on the kitchen floor from an IED wound he brought home from Fallujah. That little girl held pressure on his femoral artery with both hands and screamed into a radio until a Navy corpsman named Callahan showed up and saved his life. That girl swore someday she would pay the Navy back. Petty Officer O'Connor just saved 300 Marines with her bare hands and a screwdriver. Debt paid in full, young lady. America owes you. You could have heard a pin drop on carpet. Riley's lip trembled once. Then she locked it down. Just doing my job, Admiral. Negative, he said. You just did the job the rest of us couldn't. Carry on. He turned to the stunned colonel. Whatever she wants, she gets. Forever. And that was only the beginning. Because the real story wasn't the salute. The real story was what happened in the next 72 hours when the Taliban launched their all-out assault. The backup radio Riley built started picking up something it was never designed to hear, and the secret she'd carried since she was 16 almost cost every man in that camp his life. The assault came at last light. Hundreds of fighters, RPG teams, machine gun nests, even a captured Afghan army Humvee with a Zu-23 mounted in the back. The Marines fought like legends, but they were being flanked, ammunition running dry, medevac birds unable to get in through the AAA fire. Riley's Frankenstein radio was the only thing keeping the JTAC in contact with the sky. Then the encrypted traffic started coming through. Not Marine Frex, not NATO, something older, colder, spoken in English with Russian accents. Orders to a sleeper cell inside the wire. Coordinates for the command post. Countdown to a massive VBIED heading straight for the front gate. Riley's blood turned to ice. She recognized the code phrases. They were the exact same ones her father muttered in his sleep for years after he came home missing half his leg and most of his peace of mind. The same phrases the ONI investigators asked her about when she was 16 and trying to enlist early. The same ones that made the recruiters tell her, "Maybe after you turn 18, kid." Because her dad was still on a watch list nobody would explain. She'd spent 10 years convincing herself it was all PTSD gibberish. It wasn't. Her father, Gunnery Sergeant Sean "Pappy" O'Connor, once the most decorated Marine raider of his generation, had never stopped working for someone else. And now his handlers were coming to finish the job they started the day they blew his convoy to pieces and sent him home as a broken Trojan horse. Riley made the hardest decision of her life in about 4 seconds. She keyed the mic on the patched-together radio, interrupted the JTAC mid-fire mission, and transmitted in the clear on the exact frequency only the sleepers would hear. "This is Cable Girl. Tell Pappy his daughter says the debt's paid both ways. Stand down or I burn it all." 30 seconds of silence. Then the encrypted chatter exploded. Panic, argument, someone screaming in Russian. The VBIED never reached the gate. It detonated 2 kilometers out, driver probably shot by his own spotter. The flanking attack stalled, then collapsed. By dawn the Taliban were in full retreat. Chased by Spectre gunships, Riley personally kept on station for 6 straight hours without letting the link drop once. When the sun came up, Admiral Callahan was waiting for her outside the comms tent with a satellite phone. "Your father wants to talk." Riley took the phone with shaking hands. A gravelly voice she hadn't heard in 6 years crackled through. "Baby girl, I'm sorry. They had me by the painkillers after the amputation. Said if I didn't feed them grid squares, they'd come for you. I fed them garbage for years, but they finally caught on. You just saved my soul, Riley. I'm turning myself in today. You live your life now. You earned it." She closed her eyes, tears cutting clean streaks through the dirt on her face. "I love you, Daddy. I never stopped loving you, Cable Girl. Semper Fi." She handed the phone back to the Admiral. He looked at her for a long moment. "The Corps is prepared to bury this whole thing if you want. Say the radio glitch was just that, a glitch. Your father gets quietly court-martialed. You keep your career." Riley wiped her face with her sleeve. "With respect, sir, fuck that. My dad broke faith. I won't. Put it all on the table. I'll testify. Whatever it takes." Callahan's eyes shone with something that might have been pride. "Then you're getting a new assignment. NSW needs a senior CT with your exact skill set. You'll rate chief by Christmas. And the president wants to put a star around your neck on the South Lawn when we get home." Riley laughed once, short and sharp. "Tell the president I'll take the star if he promises to fix the VA while he's at it." Already in his inbox, petty officer. 3 months later, in a White House ceremony most networks carried live, Riley O'Connor stood in dress blues while the President of the United States hung the Navy Cross around her neck. Only the second woman in history to earn it for actions in direct ground combat as a cryptologic technician. Her father watched from the front row in a wheelchair, silver bracelets on his wrists, tears streaming down the face of a man finally free. Admiral Callahan saluted her one more time, whispering as he passed, "Your daddy raised a hell of a warrior." Riley whispered back, "No, sir, the Navy did." And somewhere in the crowd, 300 Marines who owed her their lives stood and rendered the slowest, proudest hand salute you ever saw. holding it long after the band stopped playing. America, that's your daughter. That's our cable girl. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me what part of this great country you're watching from right now. Are you in Texas? Florida? California? Alaska? Let's put some pins on the map and show the world how big this family really is. I'll be reading every single one. Semper Fi, shipmates. See you in the next 1.3.9s fast convert it into 9,000 word story. The sun over Helmand province in late July was a white-hot coin pressed against the sky, the kind of heat that made the air itself feel like breathing inside a kiln. Forward operating base Falcon's perimeter wall shimmered in the haze, and every Marine on the line knew the Taliban were coming. They could taste it the way sailors smell a storm. The morning rocket attack had already shredded the main antenna farm and turned the primary communication shelter into a smoking accordion of canvas and aluminum. The backup SATCOM radio, the only thing still tying the isolated company to Bagram, to Kandahar, to the artillery batteries and the medevac birds, was coughing its last electronic breaths. Inside the half-collapsed command tent, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Iron McAllister stood over the map table, knuckles white, eyes bloodshot from 72 hours without sleep. Around him, staff officers whispered coordinates, sergeants major counted remaining belts of 7.62, and a young captain kept repeating 40 mics out, for a quick reaction force that might as well have been on the moon. The drone feed on the big screen showed black ants massing in the Green River Valley. Hundreds of fighters, technicals, even a stolen Afghan National Army Humvee with a twin 23mm bolted in the bed. And in the middle of all that organized desperation sat Petty Officer Second Class Riley Siobhan O'Connor, cross-legged on an ammo crate, red hair twisted up under a faded multicam cap, freckles dark against skin tanned the color of saddle leather. A glowing soldering iron rested in her left hand, a Leatherman in her right, and a half-disassembled and /pierce 117G lay across her lap like a patient on an operating table. Wires of every color spilled out of it the way entrails spill out of a gut-shot deer. She was humming Enter Sandman under her breath, completely tuned out from the chaos. "Cable girl," the comm chief barked. "Tell me you've got something." "Working on it, chief," she answered without looking up. "Power amps toast. I'm robbing Peter to pay Paul." "Peter's dead and Paul's about to be," McAllister muttered. "We lose this link. We're fighting the Alamo with rocks." Riley just nodded, bit a stripped wire between her teeth, and twisted it onto a capacitor she'd yanked out of a wrecked blue force tracker. She had grease to her elbows, a streak of carbon across one cheek, and the calm of a bomb tech cutting the wrong wire. Nobody in the tent quite knew what to make of her. At 5'4" and maybe 120 pounds soaking wet, she looked like the kid sister who wandered into the wrong war. But every time the comms went down, every single time, someone yelled, "Get cable girl," and the problem got solved. The first mortar round of the new barrage whistled in, impacted 50 meters outside the wire, and shook dust from the tent poles. Nobody flinched except the new lieutenant from supply. Riley kept soldering. That was when the flap ripped open and 4 men in crisp multicam walked in like they owned the war. The lead man wore no cover, silver hair cut high and tight, for stars on his collar, and the gold trident of a SEAL. Rear Admiral Nate Callahan, Commander Naval Special Warfare Group Theater, the man whose name was whispered in the same breath as Mo recipients and ghosts. His security detail fanned out without a word. Every officer and enlisted in the tent snapped to attention so fast chairs fell over. Boots slammed together like rifle shots. Even Colonel McAllister locked up. Except Riley. She was flat on her back under the radio console now, only her boots and hips visible, still working. Callahan's eyes swept the room, lingered on the drone feed, then dropped to the pair of tan desert boots sticking out from under the table. He read the name tape sewn on the trouser leg. O'Connor. A muscle jumped in his jaw. "Petty Officer O'Connor," he said, voice low but carrying like incoming artillery. The boots stopped moving. Slowly, Riley slid out, stood, wiped her hands on her trousers, and rendered a salute sharp enough to cut glass. Admiral Callahan returned it with a precision that made 20-year chiefs feel sloppy. Then he held the salute, and held it, 10 full seconds, 15. The entire tent stayed frozen, lungs burning, waiting for whatever came next. Finally, he dropped his hand. 15 years ago, he began, loud enough for every soul to hear. A Navy corpsman named Nathan Callahan was doing trauma calls in a shitty little trailer park outside Jacksonville, Florida. Got dispatched to a trailer where a former Marine was bleeding out on the linoleum from a through-and-through femoral he'd picked up in Fallujah 6 months earlier. Artery spurting like a garden hose. Only thing keeping that Marine alive was his 11-year-old daughter holding pressure with both hands and screaming into a cordless phone for help. That girl saved her daddy's life long enough for me to get there with tourniquets and plasma. That girl looked me in the eye and said, "You save my daddy, I'll save the Navy one day." He paused. The tent was so quiet Riley's heartbeat felt loud in her own ears. I never forgot those green eyes. Petty Officer O'Connor just rebuilt a SATCOM link with bubble gum and hate, and she's about to save 300 United States Marines with nothing but a screwdriver and stubbornness. Debt paid in full, young lady. America owes you the interest. Riley's throat worked once. She locked it down. Just doing my job, Admiral. Negative, Callahan said. You just did everybody else's job too. Carry on. He turned to McAllister. Whatever she needs for the rest of her natural life, she gets. Clear? Crystal, sir. Callahan nodded once and left as abruptly as he'd arrived. The tent exhaled like one animal. Riley slid back under the console without a word. But her hands were shaking now. The real storm broke 40 minutes later. The Taliban came from 3 directions at once. Waves of black turbans and RPGs, screaming Allahu Akbar loud enough to rattle teeth. The Marines met them with everything they had. Machine guns, javelins, 40mm grenades, and pure cussedness. The sky filled with tracers and the copper smell of blood. Riley's patched-together radio became the company's heartbeat. Every fire mission, every casevac request, every desperate plea for close air went through her jury-rigged creation. She sat hunched over the console, headphones clamped on, calling corrections to an A-10 pilot who was flying so low she could hear the Warthog's cannon through the canvas walls. Repeat. Danger close. 50 meters north of the friendly smoke. Acknowledge. Roger, danger close. Good copy. Rolling in hot. The BRRT shook the ground like God clearing his throat. The attack on the east flank crumbled. Then, in a gap between transmissions, something else bled through the speaker. A voice speaking English with a thick Russian accent, using old Cold War-era code phrases Riley had heard only in nightmares. Package delivery confirmed. Grid 37 Sierra, Papa Uniform 1234, 5678. Execute on my mark. Her blood turned to ice water. She knew those grids. They were the exact coordinates of the command post. And she knew that voice pattern. It was the same cadence her father used to mutter in his sleep when the morphine wore off. Numbers, letters, broken Russian. The realization hit her like a sledgehammer. Her father, Gunnery Sergeant Sean Pappy O'Connor, Marine Raider legend, triple bronze star with V, hadn't come home broken only by an IED. He'd come home compromised. The enemy had owned him since Ramadi. The monthly VA appointments, the painkiller prescriptions, the classified visits from men in cheap suits, it had all been leash. And now they were pulling it. Riley stared at the radio for 3 full seconds while bullets snapped overhead and mortars marched closer. Then she made the decision that would define the rest of her life. She keyed the emergency guard frequency, the one monitored by every NATO asset in theater, and transmitted in the clear on the exact subband only the sleeper cell would be listening to. This is Cable Girl. Authentication Whiskey Tango Foxtrot 09er. Tell Pappy his daughter just paid the family debt. Stand the fuck down or I burn every name, every grid, every handler from here to Moscow on open air. You've got 60 seconds. She clicked off. The tent froze again. Colonel McAllister stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Petty Officer O'Connor, what the hell was? Trust me, sir. 38 seconds later, the encrypted Russian chatter exploded into panic. Someone screamed in Cyrillic. Another voice begged. Then silence. 2 minutes after that, a massive explosion lit the horizon 3 kilometers north. The VBIED that had been barreling toward the front gate detonated early by its own terrified spotter. The flanking attack wavered, stalled, collapsed. By 0300 the Taliban were running for the hills with AC-130 Spectres chasing them like avenging angels. Riley personally kept on station for 6 straight hours, voice hoarse, refusing relief, refusing water, refusing to let the link die. When the sun came up on a battlefield littered with enemy dead and American miracles, Admiral Callahan was waiting outside the tent with a satellite phone in his hand. "Your father wants to speak to you." Riley took the phone. Her hands didn't shake anymore. A voice she hadn't heard in 6 years crackled through, gravel and regret. "Baby girl, I'm so damn sorry. They had me by the pills after they took my leg. Said they'd come for you if I didn't play along. I fed 'em garbage for years, but they finally figured it out. You just wanted to hear your voice one more time before I turn myself in. You saved more than those boys last night, Riley. You saved my soul." Tears cut clean lines through the dirt on her face. "I love you, Daddy. Love you more, cable girl. Semper Fi." She handed the phone back. Callahan studied her for a long moment. "We can bury this. Say it was all electronic warfare spoofing. Your father takes a quiet plea. You keep your career." Riley wiped her face with the sleeve that still smelled of gunpowder and solder flux. "With respect, sir, fuck that. My father broke faith. I won't. Put it all on the table. I'll testify. Whatever it takes." Callahan's eyes shone. "Then, effective immediately, you're reassigned to Naval Special Warfare Development Group. You'll make chief by Christmas. And the President wants to put the Navy Cross around your neck on the South Lawn when we rotate home." Riley gave a tired grin. "Tell the President I'll wear the medal if he fixes the VA while he's got the pen out. Already drafted. Chief Select." For months later, on a cold January morning in Washington, Riley O'Connor stood ramrod straight in dress blues on the White House lawn while the President of the United States hung the pale blue ribbon of the Navy Cross around her neck. Only the second woman in history to earn it as a cryptologic technician in direct ground combat. Her father sat in the front row in an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, tears streaming down the face of a man who had finally found peace in surrender. Admiral Callahan rendered her one final razor-sharp salute and leaned in to whisper, "Your daddy raised one hell of a warrior." Riley whispered back, "No, sir. The United States Navy did." Behind her, 300 Marines who owed her their lives rose as one and delivered the slowest, proudest hand salute in Corps history, holding it long after the band quit playing and the cameras stopped flashing. "America, that is your daughter. That is our cable girl. Now I want to hear from you in the comments. What part of this great country are you watching from tonight? Texas? Pennsylvania? Montana? California? Drop your state, your city, your small town. Let's put pins all over this map and show the world how big this family really is. I'll read every single one. Semper Fi, shipmates. See you in the next fight."